All right, let's talk about Puerto Rico, an island with a complicated relationship with the United States. It's a U.S. territory, but it's not a state. It's like that friend who always crashes on your couch, but you never officially let them move in. They have some of the benefits, but not all of them, and frankly, it's a bit of a mess. For decades, there's been this back and forth about whether Puerto Rico should become the 51st state. It's a debate riddled with legal complexities, economic anxieties, and enough cultural and political baggage to fill a cruise ship leaving San Juan Harbor. And look, I'm not here to tell you what the right answer is, but what I can do, with my trusty whiteboard and a healthy dose of cynicism, is break down some of the key arguments for and against Puerto Rican statehood. Because honestly, this is an issue that deserves more attention than a gecko selling car insurance. So, let's start with the obvious. Right now, Puerto Ricans on the island can't vote in U.S. presidential elections. Think about that for a second. They are U.S. citizens, yet they have no say in who becomes the leader of their, well, let's call it their almost but not quite country. And it's not just the presidential race. Yeah, they have a delegate in the House of Representatives, but guess what? That delegate can't even vote. They're basically a very well-dressed wallflower at the political prom. Pro-statehood folks argue that this is just plain wrong. They say it's a fundamental issue of democracy and equality. They want Puerto Ricans to have the same voting rights and representation as any other state, with 2 senators and voting members in the House. Because here's the thing, without those voting members, it's much harder for Puerto Rico's needs and concerns to be heard in Washington. It's like trying to order a pizza when the guy on the other end of the line can't even hear you. Sure, you can wave your arms and jump up and down, but good luck getting that extra pepperoni. Now imagine this, a presidential election so tight, so nail-bitingly close, that it all comes down to a few thousand votes in a handful of swing states. You know the drill, wall-to-wall cable news coverage, pundits losing their minds, and everyone glued to their phones waiting for the results. Now imagine you're a Puerto Rican living on the island watching all of this unfold, knowing that you, a U.S. citizen, didn't get a say in the outcome, that your voice, your vote, doesn't count in this crucial decision. Supporters of statehood argue that this is simply unacceptable. They believe that Puerto Ricans deserve the fundamental right to participate in choosing the President of the United States, a leader who will make decisions that directly impact their lives. Opponents might say, well, they can always move to the mainland if they want to vote. But let's be realistic, folks, it's not that simple. Moving is expensive, disruptive, and emotionally taxing. It's not a decision anyone makes lightly. And besides, why should Puerto Ricans have to choose between their home and their right to vote? This isn't just about ticking a box on a ballot every 4 years. It's about having a voice, about being heard, about being a full and equal participant in the democratic process. It's about time, wouldn't you say? Let's talk about money, shall we? Because when it comes to federal funding, Puerto Rico often gets the short end of the stick. They contribute to the U.S. Treasury, but they don't receive the same level of financial support as states for things like Medicaid, education, and infrastructure. Think of it like this. Imagine you're at a potluck dinner party, right? You bring a delicious casserole, you mingle, you make polite conversation. But then, when it comes time to dish out the food, you get a measly spoonful, while everyone else gets heaping plates. That's kind of what it's like for Puerto Rico. They're part of the party, they contribute, but they don't get to enjoy the full buffet of federal benefits. Pro-statehood folks argue that this disparity is unfair. They say that as a state, Puerto Rico would finally be on equal footing and receive the funding it desperately needs to improve its infrastructure, healthcare, and education systems. It's about time they got a proper plate at the federal potluck, wouldn't you agree? Chapter 4. Building a Brighter Future. The Promise of Economic Stability and Growth. Now let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the El Moro in the room, Puerto Rico's economy. It's no secret that the island has faced its share of economic challenges in recent years, from crushing debt to devastating natural disasters. Pro-statehood advocates believe that statehood could be the key to unlocking greater economic stability and growth. They argue that becoming a state would send a strong signal to investors that Puerto Rico is open for business, potentially attracting more investment and creating jobs. Think of it like this. Imagine a small business owner trying to secure a loan. They've got a solid plan, a good track record, but there's just one problem. They're operating in a legal gray area, with uncertain regulations and a complicated relationship with the bank. It's not exactly a recipe for confidence, is it? That's kind of the situation Puerto Rico is in right now. Statehood, they argue, would provide the clarity and stability that businesses crave, making the island a more attractive place to invest and grow. It's about creating a brighter future for Puerto Rico, and frankly, who wouldn't raise a glass of pina colada to that? Chapter 5. Out of the shadows, clarity of status and sovereignty. Let's be honest, folks, Puerto Rico's current status is about as clear as a mudslide. It's a U.S. territory, but it's not a state. They're U.S. citizens, but they can't vote for president. It's a political limbo, a constitutional conundrum, a bureaucratic head-scratcher of epic proportions. Statehood, supporters argue, would finally put an end to this ambiguity. It would clearly define Puerto Rico's place within the United States, removing any lingering doubts about its sovereignty and political standing. Think of it like this. Imagine you're at the DMV, right? You've filled out all the forms, you've waited in line for hours, and then, just when you think you're about to get your driver's license, they tell you there's a problem with your status. Status? What status, you ask? Well, they say you're not quite a resident, but you're not quite a non-resident either. You see, it's complicated, frustrating, right? Well, that's kind of the feeling in Puerto Rico. Statehood, they argue, would be like finally getting that driver's license, a clear and unambiguous recognition of their place within the United States. Chapter 6. The Price of Progress, concerns about cultural and political autonomy. Now, let's pour a little café con leche and address the concerns, shall we? Because not everyone is thrilled about the idea of Puerto Rico becoming a state. Some worry about the potential impact on the island's unique culture and political identity. They fear that statehood could lead to a gradual erosion of Puerto Rican culture, as the island becomes increasingly integrated into the fabric of the United States. They worry about the potential loss of language, traditions, and that distinct Puerto Rican identity that makes the island so special. Think of it like this. Imagine your favorite quirky independent bookstore being bought out by a giant corporation. Sure, they might offer a wider selection of books, but would they still have that same charm, that same local flavor? That's the concern some people have about statehood. They worry that Puerto Rico's unique cultural tapestry could be lost in the shuffle, replaced by a more homogenized American experience. Alright, let's talk taxes, shall we? Because as much as we all love to complain about them, they're kind of a big deal. And when it comes to Puerto Rican statehood, taxes are a major point of contention. Here's the thing. Right now, Puerto Ricans living on the island don't pay federal income tax on island-earned income. That's right, you heard me correctly. However, they do pay federal payroll taxes, which fund Social Security and Medicare. Statehood, however, would likely mean that Puerto Ricans would be subject to the full range of federal taxes, including federal income tax. Now, supporters argue that this is only fair, that everyone should contribute their fair share. They also point out that statehood would come with increased federal funding, which could offset the burden of higher taxes. But opponents worry that the added tax burden could be too much for some residents to bear, particularly those who are already struggling to make ends meet. They argue that it could lead to higher costs of living and discourage investment on the island. It's a classic case of no taxation without representation versus be careful what you wish for. Now, let's not forget about the folks in Washington, D.C., because they have a say in this too, and let's just say that not everyone in Congress is rolling out the red carpet for Puerto Rican statehood. Some politicians, particularly on one side of the aisle, are concerned about how Puerto Rico's likely political leanings might impact the balance of power in Congress. You see, Puerto Rico tends to vote Democratic, and adding 2 more Democratic senators and a handful of representatives could shift the balance of power, making it more difficult for certain legislation to pass. It's a bit like a game of political Jenga where each block represents a vote, and some folks are worried that adding Puerto Rico to the mix might just topple the whole tower. Of course, supporters of statehood argue that this is a cynical way of looking at things, that it shouldn't be about political calculations, but about doing what's right for the people of Puerto Rico. But hey, this is Washington we're talking about, where cynicism is practically a love language. Here's the thing about Puerto Rican statehood. It's not just a debate happening in the halls of Congress or on cable news. It's a conversation, often a heated one, that's taking place in homes, businesses, and town squares across the island itself. You see, Puerto Ricans themselves are divided on the issue. Some are staunch supporters of statehood, believing it's the only way to achieve true equality and unlock the island's full potential. Others prefer the current status quo, wary of the potential costs and challenges of statehood. And then there are those who advocate for full independence, believing that Puerto Rico should chart its own course as a sovereign nation. It's a complex tapestry of opinions and perspectives, fueled by a long and often fraught history with the United States. There have been multiple referendums on statehood over the years, but the results have been inconclusive, with voter turnout and the wording of the questions often muddying the waters. Finding a clear and decisive path forward requires navigating this complex web of local opinions and building a consensus that has so far proven elusive. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Puerto Rico does vote overwhelmingly for statehood, and Congress gives it the green light. What happens next? Well, that's where things could get a little bumpy. Transitioning from a U.S. territory to a full-fledged state is a massive undertaking, kind of like trying to change a tire while driving down the highway. It would involve a complete overhaul of the island's tax code, regulatory framework, and relationship with the federal government. There would be new laws to implement, new agencies to establish, and a whole lot of paperwork to fill out. And let's not forget about the potential for confusion and disruption as businesses and individuals adjust to the new rules of the game. Pro-statehood folks argue that these challenges are manageable, that the long-term benefits of statehood far outweigh any short-term hiccups. But opponents worry that the transition could be chaotic and costly, potentially exacerbating existing economic problems. So there you have it. The debate over Puerto Rican statehood is a complex and multifaceted one, with valid arguments on both sides. It's about representation, about equality, about identity, and about the future of an island caught between two worlds. There are no easy answers, no silver bullets. But what we can do, what we must do, is engage in a thoughtful and informed debate, listening to all sides, weighing the pros and cons, and considering the long-term implications of this momentous decision. The future of Puerto Rico hangs in the balance, and it's a future that deserves our attention, our respect, and our commitment to finding a solution that works for everyone.